One live camera, one routine broadcast. That's all it took to capture the 6 most haunting deaths ever transmitted directly into viewers' homes. These aren't Hollywood horror films. They're real people whose final moments were witnessed by unsuspecting audiences who thought they were just watching ordinary television. It was September 12, 2016, when a routine pregame ceremony at a Texas collegiate football stadium turned into a nightmare broadcast live to thousands of viewers. Milo Harding, a 34-year-old display parachutist with over 1,800 jumps, was known for his quiet professionalism and methodical approach to equipment checks. Working as a freelance skydiving instructor, Milo supplemented his income with weekend demonstration jumps at sporting events across the region. His colleagues described him as reserved but meticulous about safety protocols. The evening conditions seemed perfect for the 3-jumper demonstration. Clear skies stretched overhead with temperatures at 82 degrees. Stadium wind readings showed crosswinds at 8 to 12 knots, with gusts reaching 16 knots over the North Rim. The local broadcast had positioned multiple cameras to capture the patriotic display, including the banner Milo was scheduled to deliver to midfield for the homecoming game. Following standard team procedures for banner jumps, Milo had disconnected his reserve static line to prevent entanglement during a potential cutaway. The banner hung from a quick-release lanyard, and his audible altimeter was programmed with standard decision and hard deck alerts, reinforcing the narrow margins once he entered the stadium bowl. The team had rehearsed the sequence twice earlier that week. The first jumper landed cleanly as planned. When Milo's canopy appeared in the stadium bowl, television commentators noted he seemed to be drifting higher and slightly north of the target area. What viewers couldn't see was the developing line-over malfunction on his main parachute's left side. Stadium wind streamers began snapping erratically as Milo entered the mechanical turbulence created by the upper deck structure. His helmet camera later revealed the progression of the malfunction. First, a subtle asymmetry in the canopy shape, then visible line entanglement preventing proper inflation on the left side. The banner added an extra procedural step at a moment when altitude was already collapsing. At approximately 1,100 feet above ground level, Milo made the critical decision to jettison the banner first. The quick release functioned properly, but precious seconds and altitude had been consumed. He then pulled his cutaway handle, releasing the malfunctioned main canopy. Without the reserve static line connected, his reserve parachute required manual deployment. The reserve pilot chute extracted the canopy, but it deployed slowly due to line tangles, providing insufficient time to achieve full pressurization before impact. Television cameras captured Milo's lateral drift toward the 30-yard line as his partially inflated reserve struggled against the stadium's turbulent air. The stadium's public address music cut abruptly. Broadcast microphones picked up a sudden, stadium-wide silence as reality became apparent. Here's what made this tragedy particularly devastating. Milo had followed textbook safety protocols, the very procedure designed to save his life. Disconnecting the reserve static line eliminated his only chance of automatic reserve deployment at low altitude. On-field medical personnel reached Milo within 90 seconds of impact. He was pronounced dead at the stadium's medical facility shortly thereafter. The official investigation determined that multiple blunt force injuries from ground impact were the cause of death, following a main canopy line-over and reserve deployment complications under turbulent conditions. What haunts viewers who witness this live broadcast is a chilling reality. Sometimes following safety rules perfectly can still lead to tragedy. It was May 23, 2017, when a routine roadside stop in a small Central California town became a fatal incident captured live by a single local news feed. Reed Weston, a 41-year-old patrol officer with 12 years of service, was known for quiet diligence and a preference for steady patrol work. Colleagues described him as measured and focused on preventing secondary crashes during stops. Late afternoon conditions were mild, dry, around 76 degrees, with light haze and a steady breeze across a 2-lane county road bordered by cured grass. The shoulder was narrow, with a short upslope embankment. A local station's crew was live from the area wrapping coverage of a vegetation fire. As they drove back, they came upon the stop and stayed on the live unit. Reed had initiated the stop for registration issues. His vehicle was positioned angled to provide a buffer to passing traffic, lights active. The sedan showed signs of mechanical trouble, a fuel sheen under the engine bay, and strong gasoline odor. Dash camera and news feed later showed steam venting intermittently. Following training, Reed directed the driver onto the shoulder and stepped back to reassess. He radioed for a tow and prepared to keep traffic slow through the area. The camera framed the scene, a small town road, one patrol unit, one stopped vehicle, and a live truck across the way. The incident started with a common ignition pathway. Fuel leaking from a compromised line pooled briefly beneath the engine bay, where vapor ignited on the hot catalytic converter. A brief flare appeared beneath the engine bay, growing into a rolling fire at the rocker panel. Reed moved the driver upslope and away, then retrieved a 5-pound ABC extinguisher from his trunk. He attacked the base of the flames, briefly checking the fire under the engine. The breeze pushed embers toward the upslope. Dry fuels lit quickly in less than a minute. Flame lengths increased as grass carried fire back toward the roadway. The feed shows Reed pivoting to cut the grass fire off at the shoulder with short extinguisher bursts. The powder briefly collapsed the flame front, but wind dispersed the agent almost immediately, allowing reignition in unburned grass under gusts around 10 miles per hour. Within moments, Reed's egress narrowed. The burning sedan and widening grass fire created converging heat, and smoke visibility dropped. The embankment slope complicated retreat as the angled patrol SUV boxed him against the upslope. Officers arriving from town were minutes out. The news crew kept rolling and relayed location details to dispatch. Everything visible aligned with policy. Vehicle angled to shield traffic. Driver moved to safety. Extinguisher deployed early. Yet the hazard arose from light fuels and hot surface ignition that spread faster than a handheld extinguisher could control. Responders reached the scene and pulled hose lines to halt spread. Medics located Reed near the patrol SUV and initiated care before transport. He did not survive. Investigators cited smoke inhalation and superheated gases as the primary cause of death. Contributing factors included wind-driven fire spread in cured grass, ignition from vapor contacting a hot catalytic converter, and limited effectiveness of a small extinguisher against simultaneous fires. Reed Weston died protecting a stranger on a quiet country road, following every protocol he'd been taught. The live footage captured something no training manual could prepare for: the moment when doing everything right still isn't enough to come home. It was November 10th, 2018, when a live community access broadcast in rural Pennsylvania became a fatal workplace accident captured on a single camera. Aurora Finch, 29, worked part-time as a lighting tech at the community center's small studio. Colleagues knew her as careful with power and patient under pressure. She split days at a regular job and evenings supporting volunteer crews using donated gear and aging fixtures. The studio was modest, a low grid on steel supports, an audience of about 24, and one fixed camera. That night's variety show added a small water fountain for a local segment. Power was basic 120-volt household service, a few lighting circuits, a GFCI outlet for the fountain pump, and taped extension runs. During rehearsal, an older light essential to the host area showed a stubborn tilt. The plan was routine dim during a transition. Have Aurora reach the short catwalk, lock the tilt, and exit. The fixture's whip showed age but passed a quick visual. The building had cleared a basic occupancy inspection. Legacy fixtures were grandfathered and not individually load tested or opened for internal inspection. When the live window arrived, the floor dimmed and the host held off to one side. The wide shot occasionally caught the grid. Aurora aligned the head and set the tilt lock. Almost simultaneously, the fountain pump, on a separate GFCI protected circuit, auto-cycled as programmed, a coincidence later noted in the timeline. As she steadied the housing, her hand contacted metal at line potential from insulation breakdown inside the fixture. Investigators later found the fixture's ground wire was broken, preventing the electrical fault from shutting the power off. Her other forearm touched the bonded rail, creating a hand-to-hand path. The program video showed no camera movement, but a faint electrical buzz carried on the audio feed. She stiffened, then slumped against the rail. Volunteers signaled to kill the power. A crew member shut down the lighting branch at the panel. The breaker had not tripped. Post-incident tests confirmed the open ground and a high impedance fault below trip thresholds. The camera stayed wide as emergency lighting came on. Staff kept the fountain area clear and opened the fixed ladder access to the catwalk. EMTs arrived and coordinated with venue staff to access the grid safely, beginning CPR once she was isolated from power. Aurora was lowered, transported, and pronounced later that evening. The failure was structural, not dramatic. The wet effect rested on a protected GFCI outlet, but the aging lighting branch powering the faulty fixture ran on a separate non-GFCI circuit with a compromised ground. A routine inspection had passed the system without testing legacy fixtures under load or verifying bonding continuity. Official findings listed ventricular fibrillation secondary to electrical exposure, contributing factors internal insulation failure, open equipment ground, preventing rapid fault clearing, lack of GFCI protection on the lighting circuit near a wet element, and coincident contact with a bonded rail. Reconstruction relied on the live feed, panel status, teardown photos, continuity tests, and statements from volunteers. Aurora Finch died doing what she loved, making small-town television possible with patience, skill, and donated time. The volunteers who knew her best said she would have wanted the show to go on, which it did, safer because of what her death taught them about the hidden dangers in everyday equipment. It was March 2nd, 2015, when a routine morning traffic segment from a small regional station in North Texas turned into a fatal aviation emergency carried live to local viewers. Everett Rhodes, 48, flew the station's light utility helicopter for weekday traffic updates. Colleagues described him as steady and conservative, a pilot who treated every flight methodically with clear contingency plans and no appetite for risk. That temperament made him trusted on a modest operation with limited resources. The morning setup favored flying. Scattered low clouds sat well above the helicopter's operating altitude. Light winds moved thin haze, and visibility was good despite intermittent sun glare. The aircraft, an older airframe maintained within schedule, launched from a small field to orbit a highway interchange that routinely clogged during the commute. The helicopter settled into a standard orbit near 900 feet above ground level. A single camera operator ran a stabilized unit feeding the control room over a live link. The morning show cut to the aircraft every few minutes with road conditions. Then the picture began to change. The stabilized image picked up a fine vibration, a slight jitter along the edges of the frame. On the aircheck used later by investigators, a faint caution tone, consistent with a drivetrain or engine warning, rose under ambient cockpit sound just before the shot started to drift. Control room logs and ATC audio captured the next steps. Everett reported a mechanical issue and indicated a turn back. He then advised he was setting up for an auto rotation to an open lot near a warehouse complex. Ground witnesses described a steady, descending arc, rotor noise changing as the aircraft glided without engine power. They noted fences and utility lines near the area, obstacles that narrowed options for a final flare. On the feed, the horizon tilted and the camera angle dropped. As the aircraft descended and its attitude changed, the transmission began to break up and it persisted on battery-backed gear before the signal fell to static. In those final frames, roof lines rose, then smeared, and the picture went dark. First responders reached the fenced loading area quickly. There was no post-impact fire. The camera operator survived with serious injuries and was transported to a regional trauma center. Everett Rhodes was found unresponsive and pronounced at the scene. The teardown revealed a subtle structural failure rather than a dramatic error. A main drive component within the transmission to rotor system showed signs of metal fatigue, rare but documented in airframes of that age. The resulting progressive vibration developed faster than the pilot could detect and respond safely. Official findings cited loss of drive, followed by an auto-rotation attempt constrained by surrounding obstacles, leading to fatal injuries on impact. Evidence came from the segment aircheck, ATC recordings, witness statements, maintenance logs, and component examination. The comment heard most often afterward was practical whether small market aircraft should be equipped with vibration monitoring systems that flag subtle changes sooner, and whether limited budgets justify newer ships over older fleets. Everett's final minutes remained consistent with the habits that defined him. He followed the checklist, made the calls, and pointed for the best open ground he could reach. It was July 21st, 2019, when a regional cable broadcast from a modest outdoor pool on the Gulf Coast turned into a fatal breath hold emergency, witnessed live by a small audience. Juniper Lane, 27, worked seasonally at a neighborhood aquatic center and trained recreationally in breath hold swimming. Friends described a careful, checklist-oriented person who preferred slow progress to bravado. She kept a simple log of practice sessions and was known for guiding younger swimmers to stop early rather than chase numbers. The late afternoon air temperature was humid, about 88 degrees Fahrenheit, with a light onshore breeze. The pool water itself was slightly cooler, around 82 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit. The Olympic-length pool had a uniform depth of 6 to 7 feet, non-slip deck surfaces, lane ropes, and ladders at intervals. The show's static apnea segment required a supervised surface breath hold, face down with the airway at water level. On deck were lifeguards, a designated safety diver per lane, an oxygen kit, and a basic first aid station. The broadcast used one deck camera and one underwater unit. Safety relied on proximity and visual checks. No real-time pulse or oxygen saturation monitoring was in use, consistent with small broadcast protocols. Event timing logs later showed Juniper's prior training baseline was below the duration typical for competitive breath hold swimmers, and she had not hyperventilated before these attempts. Crews briefed the surface protocol surface cleanly, maintain airway control, give the standard hand sign and an audible response, and remain under visual observation for at least 15 to 30 seconds after surfacing. She began her attempt with the safety diver, shadowing at arm's distance. The underwater shot showed a relaxed posture, minimal sculling, and steady buoyancy against the lane rope. When she passed her recent training baseline, the safety diver issued a check. Juniper responded and rose in a controlled ascent. She surfaced smoothly, removed facial gear, appeared to complete the surface protocol, and signaled that she was okay. The deck camera caught her holding the lane rope, breathing in shallow, controlled cycles. For several seconds, nothing looked abnormal. Then her grip loosened. The footage shows a slight sway, knees softening, and a subtle collapse onto the deck ledge within 10 to 15 seconds after surfacing, as the safety diver and a medic pulled her fully out of the water. Whistles sounded, commentary stopped. Oxygen was applied immediately. Ventilations were started first. When Juniper lost a pulse, chest compressions began. She was transported to a nearby hospital and later pronounced. The network's follow-up broadcast confirmed the death after family notification. Investigators reconstructed the sequence using the full broadcast recording, timing sheets, written statements from staff, and medical records. They noted that the event met its written protocol, but lacked the extended 15 to 30-second observation recommended after the surface signal, which likely contributed to the fatal outcome. The comment that followed locally was practical whether small productions should eliminate static apnea segments entirely or add pulse oximetry checks, longer supervised recovery, and strict cutoffs. Producers updated procedures, extended surface monitoring, increased staff ratios, and retired breath hold events. The live footage captured something no one expected to see: how quickly the human body can betray even the most careful preparation. For viewers who witnessed Juniper's final breath, the image that lingers isn't the collapse, but those few seconds when everything seemed perfectly normal. It was October 5th, 2015, when a small mid-Atlantic music festival at a county fairground became the scene of a fatal crowd incident captured live on a modest regional stream. Geneva Hayes, 36, worked as an event security supervisor on local shows that relied on temporary fencing and lean staffing. Colleagues knew her as steady, policy-driven, and persistent about details others overlooked: drainage lines, soft turf, where patrons naturally bottleneck. That habit placed her at a lateral egress gate on the festival's busiest side. Drizzle and 64 degrees Fahrenheit air made the grounds slick. The main pen at stage left sat on a slight cross slope with patchy grass over compacted soil. Barriers formed a front line, and side lanes, a swing gate at stage left, was designated to bleed pressure if density climbed. A local streaming platform carried a single jib and wide tower shot to a few thousand viewers. A mid-evening schedule shift pulled a popular act earlier, concentrating arrivals. Radio traffic noted that movement near stage left was slowing. The wide shot showed a visibly high-density patch fanning out from the front, Later reviews suggested local densities approaching roughly 5 to 7 people per square yard levels, where voluntary steps are no longer reliable. Geneva coordinated to open the relief gate. The hardware was a swing gate with a gravity drop bar latch designed to cycle only when load is near zero. Under sustained crowd pressure, the latch bound and would not travel. Wet turf lowered shoe friction, so step-back commands had little effect. Witnesses described oscillating pressure waves, space briefly opening, then collapsing as the act began. As Geneva and a colleague worked the latch, a forward pulse coincided with a shift in the flexible barrier panel next to the gate post. The panel flexed under load and pinned her against the fixed post. Radio calls captured urgent requests for a show stop or volume pull. The stream pulled to a wider frame stage sound dipped. Pinned at the gate for roughly 20 to 30 seconds within a longer period of elevated pressure, Geneva experienced sustained chest compression before the corridor could be formed. Security created a channel across the pen. The load eased and the latch finally cycled. Staff pulled her clear as medics moved in. She was transported off-site and later pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. The medical examiner cited compressive asphyxia without major external trauma, consistent with sustained thoracic loading in a high-density crowd. The safety element meant to relieve pressure. The lateral swing gate required near-zero load to operate, a condition the crowd could not provide. Under sustained pressure, the adjacent panel flexed and locked the mechanism, turning the gate into a hard point. The official review listed contributing factors: wet surfaces, reducing friction, localized densities, where self-directed movement fails a gate design that cannot cycle under load terrain, features that blocked lateral flow. Recommendations included adding load-tolerant breakaway points, separating cables from egress lines, active density monitoring, and rehearsed show-stop cues. The comment that followed locally was practical. Whether small festivals should replace swing latch gates with compression-rated push-through modules, and whether streams should carry overhead cameras solely for density calls. Geneva Hayes died trying to save people she'd never met, trapped by the very safety system she was operating to protect them. The small festival community that knew her work said her final actions reflected how she always approached safety, putting others first, even when the equipment failed her. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now